Hey, what's going on, guys? Aarava here, and welcome back to my Let's Talk F1 2018 series for the car launches ahead of the 2018 Formula 1 season. This, of course, by the title and the thumbnail, you know, is for the Mercedes W09, the 2018 challenger from the reigning world champions. So here it is then. It's a Mercedes. You can definitely tell that much by the look of the car. They haven't really changed too much in terms of the way it looks. They've changed a few of those turquoise lines they got going on from the side pod all the way down to the front suspension. But all in all, a very similar looking-ish sort of livery. They've done some weird stuff with the numbers. I suspect the FIA will probably ask them to change how those numbers look because you can hardly see them on the top of the chassis. But all in all, a very Mercedes look. I mean, you know, for today's car launches, we've got Mercedes right now and we've got Ferrari later, so be sure to get subscribed, by the way, if you want to see the video on the Ferrari later. But obviously both these teams, they've got such a big branding in terms of the way they look. They're never going to really change dramatically from season to season. But do let me know what you think of it. Any Mercedes fans out there, what do you guys think of your new livery for your car this year? And not just livery-wise, also the actual shape and body of the car is very much an evolution of last year. It's not a revolution. They didn't really need one. Even Toto Wolff describing in press conferences today, talking about, obviously, they mentioned last year's car was very much a diva, they like to call it, and they've kept on calling it a diva this year because they've said they wanted to try and bring the best parts from that diva of a car last year into this year and try and leave the worst parts back in 2017. And we'll see if, we'll see in pre-season testing and as we go on if that is the case. They've definitely changed a few things here and there, but a lot of the detailing aero-wise, I think they purposely left out, and they'll be chucking on a whole lot of stuff in pre-season testing. And so I think I definitely already was planning on doing a video in pre-season testing to show you guys any new updates and any major updates on any of the cars. But I think the way it's gone, you know, with the Renault obviously launched very, very simple and definitely probably was hiding stuff. We've seen with this Merc, they're hiding stuff. I wouldn't put it past that the likes of Ferrari and McLaren are hiding stuff. And so I definitely think that will be a good video to make next week in the middle of pre-season testing to kind of show you any big changes. Because if we go on to look at the bargeboard area of the Mercedes car, which is probably going to be the most intrigue for a lot of people, because the pattern this year so far with 2018 cars has been all the bargeboard work, has been all the side pod work, a lot of the lower teams copying Ferrari strategy or Mercedes strategy here and there in terms of how they do these end plates for the side pods. But Mercedes have very much gone for an evolution of what they had last year, this three-pronged split end plate on the side pod. The reason why I say I think they're hiding quite a bit and they're probably going to, you know, bring a whole raft of stuff to pre-season testing then Australia is because you can see this entire bit is very, very plain, very absent for any slots to, you know, cut drag or any kind of twisting to maybe, you know, shift the air delicately to where they want it to go. And it's very, you know, basic looking really from the outside perspective. So I think they will be chucking on a whole lot of new updates in terms of when they get to testing. There is a bit more detail behind, which we'll get to in a second. But, you know, from the side view, yeah, like I said, a very much evolution. You can see that snowplow still there, the snowplow that Haas have almost sort of copied. As I said, an evolution, so even Mercedes have tweaked the snowplow slightly. Last year it was kind of more triangular shaped. It would start off with a 1 point and then lead out. We'll see in other pictures it's very much like a flat front leading edge now to that snowplow. So we look here from a top-down view now. We can get a little bit of a sense of the actual car, a bit more detail into the car. So let's look at the front end here for a sec. Here's the snowplow. Now last year what happened was it kind of started here and at a fixed 1 point and then would swoop outwards in a kind of triangle shape, whereas now they've really gone quite aggressive with it. It literally looks like a bit of a plow face at the front of the car, and so they'll try and direct air. So any air that doesn't pass under the nose or doesn't get hit by the front wing obviously is going to get affected by this little plow device, and they're going to try and scoop the air and try and chuck it to all these turning vanes, the barge board area, to where they want it to the inlet, and then eventually obviously work their way around to the side pod area, which we'll get to in a second. Interesting side pod area in terms of the Mercedes car, kind of what they had from last year, but they've tried to slim it down even more. I kind of likened it on Twitter to this year. It seems like all the side pods are getting slimmer and slimmer by the car, really, and they're all kind of, it's like 2018 is the supermodel version of Formula 1 in terms of really sucking in the rear end and really trying to tuck in the edges of these cars on the side pod. But interesting camera mount of Mercedes. Last year they had a similar sort of thing, but this year they aggressively more kind of go forwards, and I just thought a very intriguing way to do that. It does look kind of odd from the top-down perspective, I'm not going to lie. Kind of just looks like a stuck-out hand reaching forward with the camera position. And, of course, the usual S-duct from Mercedes. But this is what I was talking about earlier, livery-wise. We go back to aesthetics. That you can see that number is very, very faint, so I wouldn't be surprised if the FIA kind of say you kind of have to colour color that into some blue or turquoise, because obviously it's Valtteri Bottas driving right now, so it would probably be blue, and then for Hamilton it would be the red colored in 44. But yeah, very odd choice there from Mercedes, if you will. But yeah, as we get onto the bargeboard area and just generally the more intricate parts of the car, although it looks from the outward perspective, you know, from the side of the car, very bland actually looking, if you look from the top-down view, you can see it's all about details with Mercedes. And, you know, all the top cars, really, it's about details. You know, teams like Williams and Haas, it was a big change. You know, Haas you saw basically, basically copied Ferrari, and it was a huge shift from last year. Same for Williams, you know, copying Ferrari style, and it's a huge difference to last year. Where with these top teams, because you get to a point where you're working so hard for such small gains, because that's how tough it is right at the top of the field, that it's all about little quirks and just how they sculpt certain features with these cars. And the Mercedes car, although maybe not a lot has dramatically changed from last year, it is still a work of art really in terms of around this bargeboard area. You've got the little slots in the floor ahead of the bargeboard area, and then actually the hidden detail here, you can't really see it in the lighting, but they've got so many slot gaps behind the first part of the bargeboard. So any air that goes through the first bargeboard and finds its way around, let's say it gets affected by the sledge here and goes round to about here, it's then going to get affected and go through all these slot gaps, either going to the side of the side pod or into the inlet. But you've got so many drag reducing slot gaps in there. You can see maybe a little bit clearer here in the lighting there. But they've gone for that standard winglet that was there, the winglet that the likes of Williams copied essentially. So they've kept a lot of what was there from last year, really. That's why I'd say it will be intriguing to see how much they bring to preseason testing and then Australia. We've already heard a lot of the other teams saying they're bringing a raft of updates. It usually is the same way every single preseason, but more and more now these days, teams are opting just to hide so much of their car launches, which is unfortunate in terms of really getting a sense of what the car's going to be like, but also obviously for good reason because it's getting so competitive. But as we look onto the Sidepod area now, last year the Mercedes guys had a bit of a weird kink. It would curve around here and then it had a very odd bump and then would kind of slim out, whereas Mercedes now have gone for a much more aggressive swoop from the inlet, which is still quite a wide inlet. I thought, and I think a lot of us thought, Mercedes would be maybe trying to slim down their car and maybe mimic what Ferrari or Red Bull were going to do around the bargeboard area or the inlet area. But no, they've kept the wide inlet. Even the likes of Sauber, if you watch that video, had a smaller inlet than Mercedes. So they've gone for the wide entry point, but then aggressively swooping through. But if you look at the geometry here, in terms of, I try to scribble around the basic car lines of this Sidepod. If you compare that to the Red Bull one I did in the Red Bull video, in terms of how tight it gets at the back and the actual Coke bottle shape at the very rear end of the car, I think they're pretty well matched. I think Red Bull to Mercedes. But if you compare the Sidepod from the floor going up to the engine cover, so I'm talking about these straight up lines going up as they curve up, I think Red Bull still have probably the more suckered in Sidepod overall, going from bottom to top, and definitely this main area where they're probably going to house a lot of the radiators to be cooled straight away as the air enters the inlet. Mercedes have a bit of a wider construction compared to the Red Bull car. It'll be very interesting to see what Ferrari do later today, but still nonetheless, in terms of the aggression they've then got as it tapers in, is very satisfying to look at, and the floor looks very barren at the moment. I wouldn't be too surprised if you see a lot more vortex generators and slot gaps working their way in, especially around this area, as they try and make this diffuser area as efficient as possible. And then here you go, they've got one little upright to connect the rear wing to the main part of the shark fin and the engine cover, and they've got a tiny little winglet here. I guess you could say the equivalent of a tiny lower T-wing. Obviously there's no monkey seats anymore in Formula 1. If you don't know what that is, they used to have these essentially little cascade elements that were kind of almost mimicking these front wing style cascades, and they would have one planted just above the exhaust, and so the exhaust plume would essentially get upwashed to the underside of that monkey seat. Those are now banned, and so the only two teams so far, if I remember correctly, are Williams and Haas. They've opted for a small T-wing. Mercedes opting for a tiny little winglet. I don't think you can really call it a T-wing because it doesn't really go outward all the way as much as Haas and Williams did, but a little winglet there to try and get the upwash to the rear wing to to make the rear wing work a lot better. But yeah, overall from the Mercedes car, evolution, but really nice detailing still. You can still see it's a very intricate car, and obviously they're confident that hopefully the little subtle tweaks they've made and that are probably going to come in for testing and Australia are going to fix those parts of the Diva car from 2017 that just didn't allow the car to work. You know, that was a lot of things from last year, is the Mercedes car was probably overall the best car when it worked well, but the Ferrari car almost had a better consistency at every single track. And so it was a case of Mercedes always had to try and dial in the setup and had to rely on maybe Hamilton and Bottas overdriving the car a little bit to try and make that car work at tracks where it just wasn't working as much as they wanted. And so a la Toto Wolff, hoping that the Diva kind of has been brought into 2018 in the good way rather than the bad way. From the front view, you can see what I mean by still got the chunky inlets. They have raised it slightly. I think last year the top edge of the inlet probably started around here, you would say. So they've tried to raise that entire area a little bit, try and get it away from being obstructed maybe a little bit by the suspension arm, and then leaves more space for the barge boards to work their magic to go around to the Sidepod area. But this is nothing new, but you know, any new viewers to my channel, if you've not seen the Haas video or you've not seen any videos in the past where I've done Let's Talk F1 in terms of talking about the front wing area, I thought I'd go through it again, especially because Mercedes are pretty much pioneers of this strategy of the front wing. You know, Mercedes were the first team to bring this in around 2014, where they've got these multiple archways, and this entire archway structure of this winglet at the front is all just a flow control method of the front wing to push air to the side to create this vortex, this concentrated vortex on the outside, and that as it goes downstream to the edge, to the rear end of the front tire, will try and mix the air. That mixing of air from a strong enough vortex from the side of this tire will try and smoothen out the turbulent air coming off these spinning front tires, and that will be a lot better as it goes downstream, either to the outside of the car, or if any of it happens to be suckered in towards the side pod, especially towards the diffuser area, the smoother the air they can get that, the better, of course. And so Mercedes, pretty much, they were the first team to bring in this kind of curved shape to the front wing, and then a few teams have dabbled in copying Mercedes, but still yet Mercedes have been the only team to really still have their front wing shaped this aggressively in a bid to control that air and push that air sidewards. And here you can see just the top edge of the snowplow, and just under the lighting you can see this is basically the underside of the snowplow. So this year they've made it a lot more aggressive. It was a little bit more subtle last year, so they've gone a bit more aggressive in that way. And then just the top here, they've split off their inlet into 4 different little crevices there. Last year I believe it was kind of 2 and just 1 split across the face, so they've tried to maybe chamber off the air into different compartments. So again, just, you know, these top teams looking for any little bit they can do for efficiency wise for the engine. And of course the engine, you know, Mercedes have already raved about in the off season, the winter season, they're still pushing the engine to try and find more power if they can, and I wouldn't put it past Mercedes still turning up with having the most overpowered engine compared to the other teams. And finally, as we wind down in this video, again looking on the left hand side, if you just look closely, if I zoom in here, just in terms of you can see the intricacies of the end plates on the barge board, you know, just these little tweaks of sculpture of it flicking a little bit instead of connecting to the floor simply, a little twist and warp as it comes down and joins the floor. Just little details like this are making a big difference for teams like Mercedes, whereas Williams and Haas, they're just changing big parts of their cars because they're trying to catch up to a team like Mercedes. And then again looking at the front end just from a better angle, you can get a better shape of what I'm trying to describe basically to you guys in terms of they try and control the air, shoot it, these spiral off from the end plate. The tip of these end plates have vortexes that are swirling around, and they're all going to try and channel it to improve the vortex here that is naturally going to be made anyway, even if it was a simple just one plank main plane wing. And so they try and concentrate that as much as they can because you've got all this turbulent air coming off the front tire, and they try and smoothen that as it goes towards the rear end. You know, if any of it gets suckered into towards the floor, these squirt gaps, which are all working to try and create a vacuum seal between the rear tire and the rear wing, the better they can get that, the better efficiency they have. And then again, little T-winglet there, a little end plate, nice little detailing there, and then the S duct, and the opening is around here, I believe. But yeah, there you have it, all the major talking points of the Mercedes W09. I thought there would be more, honestly, but you know, being Mercedes, being the reigning world champions, you know, maybe to be expected. I think they're hiding a fair bit of stuff that they're going to bring in for testing Australia, so that's why I say definitely probably a video in pre-season testing before Australia will be probably good and quite interesting for you guys to see. So do get subscribed for that. Obviously, Ferrari are launching later today, so get subscribed for the Ferrari launch, because obviously, you know, it's always interesting to see Mercedes v Ferrari, and they're launching on the same day this year, so that's going to be very intriguing. And as well, of course, we have McLaren then tomorrow, so do get subscribed for all that good stuff. Let me know what you thought in the comments below about the livery, and then also what do you guys think of the car. So if you did enjoy the video and found it informative, hit that like button. As I said, do get subscribed for more videos like this. We also do an F1 podcast when the season begins, so you may be interested in that, and usually we do a lot of F1 gaming stuff, so that might tickle your fancy if you have a look around if you're new around here. But I've been aarava. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you guys next time.